Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated December 26th, 2020. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's quickly start. Now, as far as today's newspaper is concerned, we do not have any new news which will be relevant for UPSC. We have an article on page number 6 related to Article 356 and the issue going on in Andhra Pradesh, which was covered recently around 10 days back. So I'm not going to repeat that. However, here we have two news. One is on page number 4 and the second is on page number 8, and both of them are in relation to the governor, specifically in relation to the governor's discretionary power. On page number 4, the Rajasthan government has an issue that the governor is not sending the state bills for presidential assent. And on page number 8, the Kerala government wants the governor of the state to call a special session in order to discuss the farm laws. However, the governor is delaying on that decision. Hence, I thought that since we do not have a lot of news today, what we could do is that we will be speaking about the discretionary power of governor today in detail, and this will be helpful both for your mains and for your prelims. Now, to understand the discretionary power of the governor, it is very important that you first understand what is the constitutional position of the governor. And to understand his constitutional position, you need to understand what is the relation which the governor of a state shares with the State Council of Ministers. Because it is this relationship with the Council of Ministers which defines the powers of the governor. Now see, as far as the relationship with the Council of Ministers is concerned, his relationship, that is the governor's relationship with the State Council of Ministers, is more or less the same as is the President's relation with the Central Council of Ministers, however with one exception. We will talk about that exception. Let us review the relationship of governor through the constitutional article. So it is Article 163 of the Indian Constitution which defines his relation with the Council of Ministers. Now, Article 163 clause 1 says that there will be a Council of Ministers headed by the Chief Minister, which is to aid and advise the governor, except for all those cases where the governor is to act in his own discretion. So, first thing which we come to know here is that the word discretion has been used explicitly in our constitution with respect to the governor. By this I mean that the constitution has specifically and explicitly said and acknowledged that yes, there are certain instances where the office of the governor has been vested with discretion. So the standard rule is same as is what with the president, that the governor too has to act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and that aid and advice is binding on the governor, except for all those situations where the governor needs to act in his own discretion. Hence, it is Article 163 clause 1 which is the constitutional basis from where the governor derives his discretionary power. Now here I want you to remember one thing, that this term discretion has been used only for governor and not for the president. Because if you will read Article 75, you will notice that nowhere the term discretion has been used for the president. So always remember this. Now secondly, not only has our constitution said that the governor has certain discretionary power, let's say in the future a situation arises where we have to decide that whether certain power or whether certain situation is governor's discretionary power or not. Then in that case, who will make the decision? Here also the constitution has left that question to the governor. Article 163 clause 2 then says that if any question regarding the same, that is whether a particular matter falls within the governor's discretionary power or not, arises, then in that case also the governor's decision will be final. He will be the final authority to make the call and his decision will not be questioned. That is, his decision will be final. But now here again, you need to ask another question. In our scheme of constitution, do you think it is possible that any decision by an executive authority can be final? Do you think it is possible? No. The reason being, ours is a democracy. We have our independent judiciary, and as was stated in the Keshwanand Bharati case, judicial review is a basic feature of our constitution. Therefore, there cannot be a complete blanket ban or there cannot be a complete immunity for the governor's discretionary power. Therefore, as far as judicial review is concerned, the Supreme Court through various judgments has allowed for a limited judicial review of governor's discretionary power. Now, what do I mean here by limited judicial review? By limited judicial review, I mean that, see, the Supreme Court will not question whether the decision which was taken by the governor was correct or not. That is not Supreme Court's fare because we have separation of power and Supreme Court cannot encroach in the working of the executive. However, the Supreme Court will only ascertain that the decision which was taken by the governor was made with a good intention. That is, it is made without any kind of ulterior motive. It was made without any kind of malified intention or motive. So only to that extent the Supreme Court will look into his decision but will not ascertain or but will not go into the correctness of his decision. Lastly, Article 163 Clause 3 then says that no court in India will inquire into what advice was given by the Council of Ministers to the governor. This is same as is what for the centre. Even for the centre, no court will inquire into what advice was given by the Central Council of Ministers to the President. So I hope this makes you clear what is the relationship of the governor with the Council of Ministers. And when we were analyzing this relation, from there only we came to know that the governor has certain discretionary power. As I said, the governor's discretionary power is explicitly mentioned and is far wider than that of the president. The question is why? Well, the answer here is twofold. See, you need to understand that the governor is basically like the agent of the center. Okay, now governor is not an elected post, correct? It is a nominated post and he is nominated by the president. By president here we mean that he is nominated by the president on the advice of the Central Council of Ministers. So basically who will be the governor is decided by the central government. Now, since the governor is the agent of the center, he is appointed by the center, he needs to act as the eyes and ears of the center, correct? Now, you imagine if you're supposed to act as an agent or as a representative of somebody, if you're supposed to act as their eyes and ears, what do you need? You need independence, you need certain kind of autonomy, you need discretion to do so. Because if you do not give that independence to the governor, then for every decision the governor has to make, he has to consult with the Council of Ministers. Then the entire idea that the governor is a representative of the center becomes null and void. Because practically that will not be possible for the governor to discharge his duties towards the center as well. So this is why, since he is the agent of center, the constitution has explicitly acknowledged that he has discretionary power. Secondly, the governor is the vital link, the vital channel of communication between the center and the state. Now, when our country got independence, there were a lot of secessional tendencies amongst the state. Hence, we went in for a unitary bias. That is, hence we went for a strong union. So that if required, the center can have a hold over the states. And it was due to this scheme of things that the governor, who is the executive head of the state, was made a nominee of the center. And this we did so in order to maintain the unity and integrity of our country. So, due to these two reasons, that he is the agent or the representative of the center and that he is the vital link as far as the Federation of India is concerned between the center and the state, he has to be given certain discretion, he has to be given autonomy and independence. I hope this is clear. Now, moving ahead, as far as his discretionary power is concerned, well, the constitution says the governor is supposed to discharge certain functions in his discretion by or under the constitution. So this term by or under the constitution is used. So this tells us that there are certain discretionary powers which are explicitly mentioned, and then there are certain powers which are derived out of the situation, though they are not written explicitly, but it has been provided so that if certain situations arise, then the governor has been given certain amount of leverage to use his discretion. So for the sake of convenience, so for the sake of you to understand better, we can classify the discretionary power of the governor into constitutional, situational and certain special responsibilities. Okay, so let us start with constitutional. One of the most common powers of the governor is to reserve a bill for president's consideration. Now, coming back to the article which was given on page number 4, here the question is that only. Now, the Rajasthan government has made certain bills to counter the centre's farm law, and they are now complaining that the governor is not sending these bills for the presidential assent. Apart from the farm laws bill, there are certain other bills also, but overall, they are saying that the governor is not doing so. Okay, so this tells us that yes, there are certain situations, there are circumstances where the governor reserves certain state bills for the president's assent. Now, coming to that question, when and which bills are supposed to be reserved? When the state legislature passes a bill and it goes to the governor for his assent, governor has three choices. Okay, now he can give the assent to his bill, he can withhold the assent to his bill, he can return the bill for consideration, or he can reserve the bill for president's assent. Now, this has been provided for under Article 200, okay, reservation of bill for president's assent. Therefore, Article 200 tells us that the governor has the power to reserve certain bills for the presidential assent. Now, here also we can classify into mandatory, the situations where he is supposed to reserve the bill, and certain situations where again he can exercise his discretion whether he wants to reserve the bill or not. Now, under Article 200, of course, it is Article 200 which says that he can reserve a bill for president's consideration. Article 200 has not mentioned which all bill. The only thing Article 200 says that if at all the state legislature passes a bill which the governor feels will derogate the power of the High Court, then in that situation, it is mandatory for him to reserve that bill for president's assent. Hence, any bill derogatory to the powers of the High Court under Article 200 has to be reserved for presidential assent. Then, under Article 288, if there is a bill which imposes tax on water or electricity in certain areas, then that bill too has to be reserved for president's assent. Now, this is not important, you should just be knowing it. In fact, from your exam's perspective, they might not just even go into the further subcategories of the bills which have to be reserved. But since I'm covering this topic, I thought I should let you know. So some of these provisions like 288 is not really important. You can keep it in mind if you want to. Otherwise, even if you don't, it's not important. Then obviously under Article 360, when a financial emergency is in place, then bill by the state government has to be reserved for presidential assent. Now then we have bills under Article 31A which talks about acquisition of estate. Let me explain this to you. Now see, under Article 31A, there are certain types of state legislations which provide for acquisition of property. Okay. And for these bills, you have to obtain the assent of the president in order to become law. The reason why such bills have to have the president's assent is that these bills are exempted from attack on the basis of their violation of fundamental rights under Article 14, 19 and 31. So since these bills have already been protected from attack on the basis of violation of fundamental rights, so it was thought so that these bills should go through center scrutiny so that we can ensure that these states' law do not indiscriminately contain any kind of provision which will violate the fundamental right to equality and the right to property. Hence, to ensure that center scrutiny or center once has taken a look at such a law which is providing for acquisition of a state, the governor needs to reserve this bill for assent of the president. Similarly, almost similar is the case with Article 31C. See, Article 31C talks about saving of laws to give effect to DPSPs. Now, under Article 31C, it is clearly said that any law which gives effect to the DPSP as provided for under Article 39B or C, they shall not be questioned in the court of law that they are taking away fundamental rights under Article 14 and 19. Hence, here also with the same intention, since there is a lack of judicial scrutiny, it is felt that the centre should at least once have a look at these bills. So, therefore, the proviso to both Article 31A and Article 31C that the provisions of this article shall not apply unless the law which has been reserved for the consideration of the president has received his assent. So, these 5 are the situations where mandatorily the governor needs to reserve the bill. Then there are certain situations where he can again exercise his discretion. One is related to any bill which is with respect to subject matter mentioned in the concurrent list. So, for example, Rajasthan government earlier had come out with a bill on labor laws. Now, since labor is a concurrent list subject, it was felt that the state law can be in derogation or can be in opposition to the central law. Hence, it was important that it should be ratified or it should receive president's assent. Then, if at all the governor feels that the bill will be ultravise the constitution, then too he can reserve it for the president's assent. Or where he feels that this bill will go against the national interest or this bill is of such a national importance that it needs to be reserved for the president's assent. Now, coming to this here. Now, here the farm bills which have been passed by the state government. Now, see, agriculture is a state law. It is given under the state list. But this situation of what is happening in Rajasthan is very similar to what happened with Punjab in November, correct? So this now the central government has passed these farm laws under interstate trade, okay, which is again center's privilege. However, the Punjab government then came out with its own farm laws under the category of agriculture, which falls under the state's domain. So it really depends upon how we are looking at it. However, in the present case of Rajasthan, the governor is well within his power to reserve a bill, because if you look here, as I was stating, if the governor feels any bill is ultravise the constitution or is against national interest or is of national importance, he can reserve it. Now these two are very subjective, and since they are subjective means they can apply to any kind of bill, correct? So here again the governor has reserved these farm bills of Rajasthan government, saying that they are of grave national importance and that they are of public interest, hence they require president's assent. So these are the situation as far as reservation of bill for president's consideration is concerned. Next, discretionary power is under Article 356. You know that if the governor feels that the constitutional machinery in his state has broken down, then he can send a report to the president saying that president's rule should be imposed in that state. Next, under Article 239(2), let's say the governor of a state has also been given the charge that he will be the administrator of a adjoining union territory. Then of course in that situation, when he is discharging his function as the administrator of the UT, he will do so independently of the Council of Ministers. Lastly, there is one situation which is specifically as far as state of Assam is concerned. The governor of state of Assam will determine the amount which is payable by the government of Assam to the district councils as a royalty accruing from licenses of mineral exploration. This is not that important, you can forget it if you want to. Then coming on to situational discretion. Now these discretions have not been specifically mentioned in the constitution and they are exercised by the governor when certain situations arise. Now these are same as that of the president. President too has the same situational discretion. First is, let's say after the election no party has got a clear-cut majority. Then in that case it is the governor's discretion that he can call that which person he calls on or which person he appoints as a CM. Now of course here certain guidelines have been given by commissions and Supreme Court, but that is too detailed. We will not talk about it in this lecture. Just remember, when no party has achieved a clear-cut majority, then it is up to the governor who he calls upon to become the CM. Of course, he has to call upon someone who he thinks can enjoy the majority. Then second situation, let's say a ministry or a government is unable to prove its majority on the floor. Let's say there was a trust vote or there was a no confidence motion introduced and the present government of the state was not able to show or prove its number. But then this ministry, that is this government, is refusing to resign. In that case, the governor has the power that he will dismiss that ministry. Last is a situation where the governor can dissolve the state legislative assembly. Now see, usually this is done on the basis of advice given by the Council of Minister, which is enjoying majority. So let's say the government is enjoying majority and it says that the governor has to dissolve the state legislative assembly. Then the governor has to abide by it. But let's say there is a situation where the government itself, the Council of Ministers itself is not enjoying majority. Then if it says to the governor that you dissolve the state legislative assembly, then what to do? Is the governor bound to listen to it? No. Here the governor has the discretion. Now, various governors throughout the history has taken different stances. Some governors did accept the advice of the government even though they did not enjoy majority. However, many a times the governors even refused it, saying that you do not have the majority, I will not do so, I will not dissolve the state legislative assembly. So here, this is also a situational discretion of the governor. Lastly, we have what is known as special responsibilities, and these are given under Article 371. Now, these special responsibilities practically mean in his own discretion, because in case of special responsibilities, though the governor is supposed to consult the Council of Ministers, however, the final decision is his own individual judgment, which no court can question. Hence, special responsibility under Article 371, which includes establishing separate development boards in certain areas of Gujarat, Maharashtra, administration of tribal areas in Assam, hill areas in Manipur, etc. All these, whatever, fall under Article 371 are special responsibilities of that governor of that particular state. This you can read from Article 371 directly. So this is all about the governor's discretionary power. I hope the governor's constitutional position, his relation with the Council of Ministers is clear. You understand how his discretionary power is different from that of the president and what kind of discretionary power does he enjoy in our country. So with this, let's take up our next news. This news appears on page number 6 and it is titled The Fallout of Keying in the Wrong Labour Codes. Well, I'm sure all of you are familiar with the context of the happening which happened at the Wistron production facility. However, to bring you up to speed, see, the opening of this Wistron production facility in Karnataka was considered to be a very good move, because here it was expected that India will now manufacture various components for global tech majors such as Apple, etc. And this was considered to be as a major thrust, a major boost to Make in India initiative as well as the Atmanirbhar Bharat. However, the recent large-scale labor unrest accompanied with the violence in this Wistron production facility has affected the investor sentiment in India, and in fact even questions on India's ability to attract global MNCs from China is being asked. In addition to all of this, the Wistron incident has also highlighted that the labor capital relations in India are very inequitable, and this is leading to very exploitative labor practices. Hence, in this regard, what is required is that we need to provide certain safeguards for the working class, for the laborers in these newly introduced labor codes. What is the need of the hour is that these labor codes should strike a balance, between the need to attract foreign capital at one place on one hand, as well as the need to protect the rights of the working class as well. So quickly coming on to the article, what exactly led to the industrial unrest at Wistron? There were three major reasons for it. The first reason attributable is the higher share of the contractual workers. Well, the Wistron company employed 1,300 regular workers. However, the contractual workers employed by them were almost 8,500. So clearly you can see that the number of contractual workers employed by them was a lot higher. Now, the thing is that these contractual workers are hired through a contractor. A contractor is like an intermediary. And these people, these contractual workers, are not on the payroll of the company. It is this contractor who is responsible to give payments to these workers. And furthermore, these contractual workers only get the salary, only get the payment, and they do not get any other social security benefits such as insurance or provident fund, etc., which a regular or a permanent employee would get. And this recent incident was attributed to the non-payment of wages to these contractual workers by these intermediaries. Now, if you would be aware, the recently adopted Industrial Relation Code of 2020 has provided for what is known as fixed term employment. Now, this fixed term employment refers to that kind of employment where the worker is employed for a fixed duration of time based on a contract, and this contract is signed between the worker as well as the company or the employer which is hiring him. Now, this fixed term employment is a middle way between a permanent employee on one place and a contractual employee on the other hand. So in a fixed term employment, the employment is in a written format. Okay. It is in the form of a written contract. And here in the fixed term, no contractor is involved. Unlike what happens in contract labor. So in contractual labors, the company gives the contract to an intermediary or a contractor, and then this contractor hires these workers, and the contractor only is responsible to give payments to these contractual workers. However, in fixed term employment, we do not have any kind of contractor, and it is the company only which will make the payment to the worker. Furthermore, these fixed term employees are on the payroll of the company, unlike the contractual worker. The only difference of how fixed term employment is different from the permanent employment is that in the fixed term employment, the term is fixed as the name suggests. So for a particular period of time, let's say the contract is for 6 months or it's for 12 months, beforehand only it is decided that you will work for us for 6 months, you will work for us for 12 months, and during this period you will be on the payroll of the company. You will be getting all the social security benefits, such as the insurance or the provident fund, just as a permanent employee does. The only difference being, once the period of 6 months or 12 months is over, you will disappear or you will be removed from the payroll of the company. However, the contractual worker, on the other hand, as you would be aware, do not get any kind of social security benefit. They do not appear on the payroll of the establishment. So this Industrial Relations Code of 2020 provided for this fixed term employment, and it was considered as a good move. However, the problem here is that majority of companies in India are very reluctant to hire fixed term employees. Any guesses why? Well, the reason is very simple and obvious. They do not want to give these workers the social security benefits. Because obviously, if you can get cheap labor, if you can get people to work for you on contractual basis, why do you want to give them a permanent or a fixed term employee and then give them provident fund also, insurance and other social security benefit? Think from an employer's point of view, right? You will want to save your money. So due to this, they engage or they want to hire contractual worker. The second cause was increase in the number of working hours. The contractual workers were made to work for 12 hours instead of 8, and they were not even given overtime or additional compensation for these additional 4 hours. Lastly, even the absence of labor union is attributed as a factor, because if you had labor union, then this labor union could have aired or went out the grievances of these workers. In the absence of labor unions, we could not have a proper channel where we could, where the workers could release or air their grievances. Hence, they took to violence and labor unrest. So what has been the response of Wistron? Well, it has been, if not adequate, it has been in a positive direction. Wistron has taken a number of measures to address this unrest. It rendered a public apology to the workers. It removed its vice president and also promised that they will take corrective measures. On the other hand, Apple has said that it will not give any other additional orders to Wistron till the time Wistron addresses the grievances of the worker. And Apple also said that Wistron should come out with some kind of code of conduct which it should follow, so that all the labor rules and regulations are adhered to. So this was what has happened or what has gone down. But what we need to understand as far as your examination is concerned, as far as having a holistic idea about the issue is concerned, is that what is the core problem here? As I stated, the core problem was the higher share of contractual workers. Well, in the present case, Wistron claims that it had already deposited the money to the staffing firm or the contractors to pay to these contractual workers, and that the failure was on part of the staffing firm in not paying the wages to the worker. Now, this clearly shows that there is a lack of coordination between the employer, for example, Wistron in this case, and the staffing firm or the contractor which is supplying these contract workers. Moreover, this present case is a clear example of abdication of responsibility both by the employer, that is the Wistron, as well as by the staffing firm. Because Wistron is saying that we did deposit the money and it was the contractor who did not pay, and of course the contractor is at fault. In fact, over a period of time, the share of contractual workers in the registered manufacturing has increased to 36% in 2018. So this incident at Wistron, is just the tip of the iceberg. All of this clearly points to the fact that there is lack of sufficient safeguards for the contract workers in our country, and that these lack of safeguards for the contract laborers could worsen the industrial relations in the times to come. So what is the solution? Well, the solution is what I discussed earlier, that is the fixed term employment as has been suggested by the Industrial Relation Code of 2020. Now, what are the benefits of fixed term employment? First, of course, it will give the employers the flexibility in hiring, as they can hire the worker for fixed duration and for the work that may not be permanent in nature. Secondly, fixed term contracts are negotiated directly between the employer and the employee, and therefore they reduce the role of a contractor. Furthermore, this benefits the worker since the code entitles the fixed term employees the same benefits such as medical insurance and pensions which are given to the permanent employees. Hence, overall, this fixed term employment will improve the conditions of temporary worker when we compare with the contract workers. However, all of this brings us back to the same question. Why are the companies still hiring contract laborers having a provision for fixed term employees? Well, ideally, if you think about it, if we wanted that the company should do away with contract laborers and should move towards fixed term employment, what the government should have done is that the government should have completely put a ban on contract labor, especially in core activities. Core activities are all those activities which are considered essential. So at least the government should have completely put a ban on contract labor in core activities, but the government did not do so. Why? Well, the answer is that the Labour Code on Occupational Safety and Health has allowed the use of contract labor in certain specific situations. For example, let's say there has been a sudden increase in the volume of work in the core activity, which needs to be completed with a specified period of time. Then what will you do? If you do not have the provision of hiring contract labor, how will you fulfill the increased volume of work? To give you an example, during this COVID-19 pandemic, there was a requirement for masks, sanitizers, etc. Now let's assume, had there been a provision that we could have no contract labor in these industries which manufacture these masks or these sanitizers, etc., then how and from where would you have gotten so much of labor workforce to fulfill the demand? Therefore, keeping in mind such emergency situations, the Labour Code on Occupational Safety and Health has allowed that you can use contract labor, but in certain conditions. But here it is this provision only which encourages the use of the contract workers over the fixed term employees and undermines this initiative of introducing fixed term employment. Second, as I was stating earlier, the cost of hiring a contract labor is still lower than fixed term employee because, of course, you don't have to give social security benefits to a contract labor, but you have to give them to the fixed term employee. Thirdly, for the companies, hiring contract laborers reduces their compliance cost because it is the staffing companies or the contractors which are required to take care and handle all the monitoring and litigation cost. So if there is a staffing company who will look after all the litigation and the monitoring aspect, why would a company want to take unnecessary burden or the extra headache of compliance, right? And lastly, in India, there has been an increase in these staffing companies. You have readily available contractors, peoples, intermediaries, these staffing companies who are ready to give you people on contract labor. So from a point of view of a company, if cheap labor is available to you so easily, why do you want to go ahead, negotiate with labor and get into this entire thing of fixed term employment? So coming to the way forward, what can we do to nudge these companies to move from contract labor to fixed term employment? Well, the first thing we can do is that we should put a limit on the number of contract labor you can hire in a company in comparison to the overall workforce. So for example, let's say that out of 100% workforce, only 20% can be contract labor, so on and so forth. So you can put a limit on the number. Then secondly, you can put a limit on the type of work where these contract labor can be hired for. So for example, you can say that only in XYZ activities we will allow contract laborers, but in others we will not allow. So on and so forth. So these are certain measures which we can take so that we nudge these companies to let go of contract labor and hire fixed term employment. However, having spoken so well about the fixed term employment itself is not free from issues. Since in this article I have focused on fixed term employment, from the mains perspective, I am also going to tell you what are the constraints related to fixed term employment so that you have a holistic idea about fixed term employment, not just about its benefit but also about its issue. See, the issue with fixed term employment, especially as far as India is concerned, is that our Industrial Relation Code of 2020 does not specify as to what will be the minimum or maximum tenure for hiring fixed term employees. So it does not say that you can hire a fixed term employee for only 6 months or 12 months or 1 year, etc. There is no minimum or maximum tenure. Then it does not specify the number of times the contract of a fixed term employee can be renewed. So can it be renewed after 6 months for, let's say, 10 times, 20 times, or will it go on perpetually? Again, the code is silent. Then it also does not restrict the type of work in which the fixed term employees can be hired. So the absence of all these safeguards in fact lead to erosion of permanent jobs. Because think of a scenario, forget about contract labor for a moment. We have the provision of fixed term employment, because you know what I'm going to tell you, all this issue is actually what is happening in other countries, countries which have earlier adopted fixed term employment, and they are facing this issue. So the problem with fixed term employment is that if you do not specify the tenure, you do not specify the number of times the contract can be renewed or the type of work where you can hire these FTE, then the problem is that these industries will stop hiring permanent employees and they will only keep on sticking to a fixed term employee. So we do not even want that, correct? So to prevent the erosion of permanent job, it is very important that even as far as fixed term employment is concerned, there has to be certain specification, there has to be certain safeguards. So what are those safeguards? Well, there are certain recommendations. The Second National Commission on Labour in 2002 recommended that no worker shall be kept as a temporary worker for more than 2 years as opposed to a permanent job. So that is to say you can hire a person as a temporary worker only for 2 years, but more than 2 years you have to give him a permanent job. Furthermore, the International Labour Organization has highlighted that several countries have restricted the use of FTE by following these measures. First, they have limited the renewal of the contract. For example, Vietnam, Brazil and China allow only 2 successive fixed term contracts. Then you can also limit the duration of the contract. For example, Philippines limits it up to only a year. And lastly, we can also limit the proportion of the fixed term employees to the overall workforce. Hence, it is felt that the recommendations of the Second National Commission on Labour and the ILO need to be incorporated within these fixed term employment to make them more holistic and even to safeguard the interest of these fixed term employees in the future when and if the companies in India are comfortable with the idea of fixed term employment. With this, let's take up our next news. Now, this news appears on page number 6 titled Recharging DTH. Now, though this has been written as an article, it is not important. Nothing from the mains perspective will come from this topic. However, we will look at the recent changes or this news with respect to prelims. Well, the context is that recently the Cabinet of India has approved the revised guidelines as far as DTH broadcasting is concerned. Now, as per these revised guidelines, license for DTH will now be issued for 20 years. Earlier it was issued for 10 years. And then the license may be renewed by 10 years at a time. Then earlier the license fee was 10% of the gross revenue. Now it has been made to 8% of adjusted gross revenue. And lastly, the FDI cap in DTH has been increased to 100% from the earlier FDI cap of 49%. Now, since I have mentioned FDI, let us quickly look at FDI. Now, if any foreign company makes less than 10% investment in any listed company, it is considered as a foreign portfolio investment. However, if in any listed company the foreign investment is of 10% or more, it is considered as foreign direct investment. The difference between FPI and FDI is that FDI gives you both ownership and management rights of a company. However, FPI only provides for ownership in accordance with the shareholding. So this is the major difference between FPI and FDI. Now, since 1991, the government of India has opened and liberalized a lot of sectors of Indian economy, and currently the FDI limit and the route for various sectors is as following. Now, here the term automatic and government route is mentioned. Automatic is when no prior approval of the government or the RBI is required before the investment. However, government route means that we require prior approval of the government. Now, for agriculture and allied activities, it is 100% through the automatic route. For coal mining also, it is 100% automatic route. For defense, see, it is automatic up to 49, but if anyone wants to invest beyond 49, they need government's permission. Print media, it is 26% through government route only. No automatic FDI is allowed. Then airports, 100% automatic. Telecom, 100% automatic. 100% automatic up to 49, beyond 49 through government's approval. Single brand retail, we have 100%, which is automatic up to 49 and government route beyond 49. Private sector bank is 74%. Public sector bank is 20%, that too with government route. Insurance and pension, it is 49% through automatic route. Lastly, there are certain sectors in which no FDI is allowed or FDI is prohibited. These are lottery businesses, gambling and betting, chit fund, nidhi company, manufacturing of cigar, cheroot, manufacturing of cigars, cigarettes or any other tobacco products, activities in sectors not open to private investment such as atomic energy and railway operations. So in all of these, FDI is prohibited.